Hi there, it's Nicole here today for Simon Says Stamp, and I am sharing a card created with the April 2018 card kit. This card kit is called Beautiful Day, and it has this amazing large stamp set in it with lots of fantastic butterflies and sentiments. There is even a stencil. I'll be sharing a card using that tomorrow. Today I'm going to focus on the stamp set included in the kit. We're going to start with a greeting from the Beautiful Day clear stamp set, and then from there I will stamp some butterflies and some greenery and leaves and things around it to kind of fill in my background. I want to do an embossed resist type of background here. The butterflies are the focal point, and I'm going to color them kind of in rainbow color that matches some of the really rainbow Lawn Fawn pattern paper in the kit. But I want them to kind of have that stained glass appearance, so we'll be using Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers to watercolor the butterflies and then add some color to the background to really make them pop. So I'm going to start with my greeting and my 4 butterflies here. And I'm going to go ahead, or 3 butterflies I guess. I'm going to ink these up, stamp them with Versamark ink on Bristol Smooth cardstock, and then sprinkle on some white embossing powder and heat set that. I started small and worked in kind of groups, if you will. I started with my focal point, which is obviously the greeting and the butterflies, and then I'm going to fill in around the edges. So I found it easier to go ahead and emboss as I went. Sometimes I will do all my stamping and then embossing, but I was afraid I would get my fingers in it, smudge it or whatever. So it's much easier to go ahead and just heat set as I go. So I'm going to use my heat tool, melt all this embossing powder, then put my background back in my MISTI and use some of the other stamps from the stamp set to fill in. I wanted my butterflies kind of floating up from the bottom, up kind of around the greeting, so kind of starting in that lower right corner, moving to the left, and then up into the upper right corner of the card, and then along the sides and kind of coming up and then down from the top left corner, I want greenery. And just little hints of it. There's a couple of great images from the Beautiful Day stamp set, and we're going to use those to add that into my background. So here is lining up some of those greenery images. Go ahead and stamp these. Again, using Versamark ink, sprinkling on my white embossing powder. Just little hints of the greenery are going to show up along the sides. So there's really not going to be a complete image of these. In fact, I think every butterfly, with the exception of the one in the upper right corner, cut off on an edge. This gives you a much more grounded image, like things aren't just kind of floating out there. It's more of a snapshot view of the overall scene. It's really hard to see the white tone on tone here with the white embossing. Once I start watercoloring, hopefully you'll be able to see this background come to life. So I'm going to clean off my stamps. I want to readjust the greenery and I want to stamp these again. So I want a little bit down here in this bottom left corner. I want a little bit more along the right edge. We'll stamp those, and then what I'm going to finish with is, once I have that, I really wanted 4 butterflies. A lot of times I'm not a big fan of doing an even number, but where they're all kind of coming up and off of edges and cut off and things, I really felt like I needed one more to fill in that left side of the card. So I'm going to pick one of the smaller butterflies that I haven't already used and stamp that over on that left edge. And that will finish off my stamping and embossing here for my background. Here's that final butterfly that I'm going to stamp real quick. And then we can finally start coloring this in. This is one of my favorite techniques, is using the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers with a water brush pen to add some beautiful watercoloring detail. I definitely pulled my color choices from the pattern paper. I knew I was going to use some of the really rainbow pattern paper to create an envelope liner that coordinates beautifully with this background. So I wanted my butterflies to all be very rainbow and kind of have all of the colors that are going to be in that envelope liner represented in my watercolor background, because I'm not using any of that pattern paper on the actual card front itself for this design. I have lots of my zig markers here. The exact colors I'm using are all linked below or linked on my blog post. I just picked some colors that complemented the pattern paper. I'm laying down little bits of the color, blending out. I usually lay down the dark color, blend out with the lighter color a little bit, and then I take my water brush pen and blend that out. The embossed lines are going to hold that color inside the image area. I love it because I call it kind of cheater watercolor, which is what I love, because I'm not the best watercolor, and so it holds that color in place, so I still get that watercolor look, that kind of imperfect colored look, without having to really stay in the lines. The embossed area keeps my color inside the lines. So let's go ahead and do the greenery, because I think that will help maybe make the background pop. The sentiment, obviously, we're going to have to add color to the background so that you can read it, because the white on white is not going to be legible. I love when to watercolor images or backgrounds, I guess, like this, and then pull that color or that background color in at the end, and all of a sudden all of those images just pop off the background. If you didn't want to watercolor in the background, you could always emboss your images with a colorful embossing powder, maybe silver or gold, even black, and your images will pop off the page, and you don't really have to add any background color if you don't want to. So there's all the greenery. I think that kind of helps show the kind of feel and look I was going for here. We're just going to continue to color these in. I did speed through this, but I left it in because I know my coloring girls like to kind of see what all is happening and going on there. So I left it in there for you. And guys, I don't want to leave anybody out there. And the antennae are pretty small. This is one of those areas where if you don't emboss with a colorful embossing powder, that detail gets lost. So we definitely want to add some color to the background. I tend to gravitate towards a blue background almost always with these kind of things. This time I usually go pretty light. I use a haze blue or the light blue markers and watercolor that in, and you'll see that here in a minute. This time I did go with light blue, but I even pulled in a little bit of the blue marker, that darker blue that you're seeing here, to really make my blue background a little bit more prominent, not quite such of a light blue wash. I wanted a little more depth, I guess, to it. Aren't those butterflies pretty? I just love them. I think there are so many ways you could do this. Another idea, if you want to save a little bit more time and want more of a little artistic effect instead of precision coloring, consider doing the exact same thing, stamping and embossing, and then taking distress inks. We're getting 2 distress oxide inks in the April kit, the new Mermaid Lagoon and Squeezed Lemonade. Maybe take those, and you could do a very artistic background. Just apply those inks to the background, and the emboss resist is going to pop up. But instead of coloring in specific images and areas with a certain color, it's going to be a more artistic effect. I think that would be beautiful as well. I would probably pull in another color or two with those 2 colors, maybe even do a whole bunch of color. You can spritz it with water from a distress sprayer and add splotches of water to really distress it and make it interesting. You could add paint splatters. I'm going to add paint splatters to this design, but I think with an artistic-y type background, that would be really fun as well. Lots of things to do. So I'm going to scribble my light blue marker on my acrylic block and start coloring in my background. This is what I generally start with and what I generally feel comfortable with doing, but then I did pull in a little bit of blue. I cut out a lot of that because it's just watercoloring around the images and getting that color there. Now I used the Simon Says Stamp envelope liner die to die cut one of the pattern papers from the card kit. This is the Lawn Fawn Really Rainbow Pattern paper. And then I'm going to apply that inside the ultra white envelope, also that comes in the card kit. I love when Simon adds envelopes to their card kit. And that's going to give a really beautiful finished look to the envelope. I love opening up an envelope that has this beautiful liner in it. I'm going to put a little picket fence and Mermaid Lagoon distress paint on an acrylic block, water them down with water, and then I'm going to do the white first and pick that up and add splatters to my background. Then I'm going to pick up the Mermaid Lagoon and do the same thing. The only thing here is you're going to have to let it sit and completely dry for a little bit. I think you could heat it up with a heat tool. I actually had some other things I needed to go do, so I let that sit for, I would say, probably a good hour to 2 hours before I came back to it or was able to come back to it. I also added a little bit darker ink, watercolor to the insides of the loops on the letters on the greeting. You might notice in the finished card, I am stamping another greeting from the Beautiful Day stamp set on black cardstock using Versamark ink, heat embossing with white embossing powder. We're going to trim that down and pop that up with some foam adhesive squares right below the greeting. Here's a good look at the darker areas inside the loops on the letters. I did that purposely. Actually, it was a happy accident. One of the letters had a little bit more of that darker blue color pool up inside, and I loved the look, so I went back and did that to all of the letters. We're going to adhere this to a white top fold card base. Use a Teflon bone folder to get a nice score line. Pop up the greeting right here. And that's really going to finish off this card. Such a fun way to use this amazing new stamp set included in the kit, also available for individual purchase. Such a beautiful, happy, fun card kit for April 2018. So many great things you can do with this kit. I can't wait to see what you guys create with the April kit. Now I decided to do one final thing, and that's to take some Nuvo crystal drops and add those to my card for some dimension. Thanks for joining me today for this watercolored butterflies card featuring the Simon Says Stamp April 2018 card kit. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Simon Says Stamp that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.